Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Thank you. So nice to see everyone. So, as I mentioned, today we're going to be talking about equanimity, and it's a key concept of mindfulness. But what does it actually mean? Well, I put it into Google just to see what might come up, and believe it or not, there were 3,380,000 results. So, a lot of people want to know what it means, I guess. A couple of the definitions I found, this one from Wikipedia, I thought was interesting. It's from the Latin word equinamitas, meaning having an even mind. So equus is even, and anima is mind. And they say it's a state of psychological stability and composure, which is undisturbed by experience or exposure to emotions, pain, or other phenomena that may cause a person to lose the balance of their mind. The virtue and value of equanimity is extolled and advocated by a number of major religions and ancient philosophies. Nice, huh? And then Merriam-Webster Dictionary gave it a slightly more concise definition: an evenness of mind, especially under stress. Well, both are correct, but this is just to say it's very much in the mind of society these days, certainly in these times of pandemic. But even before, I found that Dave Chappelle, the comedian, had actually done a Netflix special in 2017 called Equanimity and the Bird Revolution. And how those two things go together, I'm not really sure. But anyway, just to say it's quite popular right now. But I'm going to try and put my own spin on it. So here you go. For me, equanimity means balance of heart and mind with no resistance, simply being with what is in a state of acceptance, but not passivity. So it does not remove the responsibility or the ability to bring about change. Eckhart Tolle says to be okay with what is the beginning of change, and I completely agree. So it's a very real engagement with what we're facing, but in a way that enables us to see clearly the changing weather patterns of our mind, as well as the dynamic changes in the world, which right now is very important. So it's an attitude of mind that we can change and train. One of my teachers, Martin Aylward, describes it as undefended, undistracted, and undemanding. I like to think of it as containing 3 A's: awareness, acknowledgement, and acceptance. As we've talked about when we talk about doing the RAIN exercise, these are the 3 key components. So it's a very powerful tool, helping us to navigate the highs and lows, both in our meditation practice and in our daily lives. It's not reactive, it's not grasping, it's not resisting. We are wired actually to resist unpleasant things, pushing them away. And we're wired to react to pleasant things by holding on and grasping and clinging. And the idea with equanimity is we understand that we can't do either of those things. So it's a quality to be reserved not just for our inner life, but our external lives, especially now. So requiring that same awareness, acknowledgement, and acceptance in this time of the pandemic, when we're forced to social distance, forced to wear masks, forced to do all our meetings on Zoom. How can we manage our expectations so we're not caught in clinging to a reality that doesn't exist anymore? Some past experience, like when we could just go out to a restaurant. Cultivating equanimity is a resource that can help us navigate our way through lives. In fact, I was on a call recently this week with Diana Winston, who's head of the UCLA mindfulness program, and she said, how do we use our mindfulness in this time of the pandemic? And I said, Diana, it's everything we've learned. So when we are moving into the present moment, we can't hold on to what was there before. She always likens it to holding on to a rope that is moving and changing. And if you are holding on, you're going to get rope burn. But we can't cling to something that no longer exists. So we've been in this pandemic for 3 months. This is now. This is the reality we're dealing with. So we kind of have to get used to it. And then the other part of mindfulness helps us to understand that things are going to change. So even though this is a very troubling time right now, there is that idea that all things change. We have been in pandemics before. They do go away. We just don't know when. So it's navigating that uncertainty that makes things difficult, right? And cultivating equanimity helps us to do that, helps us to manage that idea of the unpredictability and uncertainty in life. And it allows us to, understand that our difficult thoughts are going to be there. And we just don't have to over-identify with them. Things will change and pass. As Eckhart Tolle also says, what you resist persists. So if we don't want to accept the current situation of this pandemic, we're trying to hold on to the way things were. We're just causing ourselves stress and anxiety. We won't be able to let go. So I think there are three main obstacles to equanimity. The first is ego identification. The second is not being located in the present. And the third is constant distraction or busyness. So what do they mean? Well, ego identification is really just the stories that we tell ourselves. I'm always wrong. Nobody likes me. I'm too heavy. Whatever those stories are, which, as we know, Tara Brach says, just because you believe it doesn't mean it's true. But I'm going to quote a researcher who actually studied the stories we tell ourselves and the emotions that they engender. And you'll understand from a scientific perspective that we don't have to hold on to those. In terms of not being located in the present, that's a really important part of mindfulness, right? Being in the now, being present, and cultivating that sense of presence. I personally know it incredibly well because after my accident, I was literally frozen for about 3 years. I think I was just a robot going through my life, getting up, eating. I ended up watching a lot of MTV. It was just launching then. So I didn't know what to do. It took me 3 years to wake up and become alive again. So I am somebody who understands what it's like to be stuck. And distraction, just constantly being busy, constantly, being focused on doing some activity, on trying to achieve something, and not having a sense of calm, of being with just what is. So it's that avoidance technique, whether it's immediate gratification, whether going to the refrigerator or turning on the television or constantly looking at social media, whatever it is, so that we don't come into the present moment with ourselves. We're just distracted by tools, thoughts, anxiety. So these are just very comfortable and acceptable obstacles to equanimity. And the idea is, can we, and I'm going to suggest some tools, see if we can overcome those. But first, let me quote from this TED Talk, which I will send the link to. It's by a researcher named Lisa Feldman Barrett. And she's a psychology professor who, for the past 25 years, has studied, mapped, and researched facial expressions, scanned brains, and analyzed hundreds of physiology studies to understand what emotions really are. And her research shows emotions are inherently guesses or predictions, and that are not hardwired into our brains. So let me just expound on what she says. I'm going to quote from her talk. So predictions are the way your brain works. They help you to make sense of the world in a quick and efficient way. Using past experience, your brain predicts and constructs your experience of the world in real time. And it's the same way that you construct your own emotions. Emotions are guesses that your brain constructs in the moment when billions of brain cells are working together. And she says you have more control over those guesses than you might imagine. Your brain only comes pre-wired with feelings that are directly related to the physiology of the body, like calmness and agitation, excitement, or discomfort. But these simple feelings are not emotions, and they have very little detail. So you use predictions to link the sensations in your body with what's going on around you to form your emotions. She says you are not at the mercy of mythical emotional circuits buried deep inside some ancient part of your brain, which is what many of us think. She says, I don't mean that you can just snap your fingers and change how you feel the way you change your clothes, but your brain is wired so that if you can change the ingredients your brain uses to make emotion, then you can transform your emotional life. You have the capacity to turn down the dial on emotional suffering and its consequences for your life by learning, and listen to this, how to construct your experiences differently. Does that sound familiar? I think it's almost a direct reiteration of what David Foster Wallace said. So we can choose how to construct meaning from our experiences. I was just amazed at the similarity there, because David Foster Wallace gave his speech in 2005, and she gave this TED Talk in 2015. In fact, I tweeted to her, I'm on Twitter a lot, I tweeted to her that this was one of my favorite TED Talks, and I wondered if she'd heard of the David Foster Wallace, and she liked it, so I think she has heard of it. Anyway, that was cool. So here are some tools we can use to help us achieve, at least in the short term, an equanimous state. So we've gone over a couple already, but I'm going to just reiterate them and add some new ones. So naming and labeling, we've done that a lot in our meditation. So if your mind wanders, you just label it. I'm planning, I'm remembering. And that happens all the time. It can happen just in the minute. You don't have to be meditating to go, oh, I feel anxious right now. So labeling just helps to provide some context and a little bit of distance from being in the moment. And then we have the tools like we discussed last week, the pause practice, stop and reel, allowing us to have that distance, creating a gap between our emotions and our reactivity, and coming into the present moment to feel that sense of aliveness and that spaciousness. So those tools are absolutely fundamental. But there are a few others that can help. Just simply letting the discomfort or anxiety go, the way we say, let your thoughts go, like they're clouds passing through. Just don't get so attached to it. Let it blow through like clouds. And then, just recognizing, oh, I'm alive. You can also bring your attention to some neutral part of your body. I've seen that work many, many times where people are feeling anxious and stressed, and they can just close their eyes for a minute and maybe feel where they're grounded. Are their feet on the floor? Are their thighs on the chair? Just some neutral part of your body, and you just bring your attention there. It definitely helps to calm things down. Then there's wise distraction, which is the difference between busyness. But wise distraction is just, again, moving your attention to something beautiful, like the trees or the birds or, your pet, or thinking of a loving friend or something, just to regain capacity to move forward. For me, I actually use that live feed from Stonehenge. It's so beautiful just to watch the light, and you can move back and forth in time. And there's that abiding presence of those stones having been there for thousands of years that I find very helpful. Watching a funny movie or a television show. Again, this isn't something you want to do on a repetitive basis, but when you're in that moment charged, yeah, humor is a wonderful tool. Self-compassion, that's another one. You can be so easily just giving yourself a hug or putting your hand on your chest. These things work wonders. But again, just remembering you're human, and you're going to have moments of highs and lows, and that they pass. So give yourself a hug and say it's okay. A little loving kindness goes a long way. And then last but certainly not least is movement or exercise. As we know, movement such as yoga or running or walking even, it releases dopamine. And dopamine just makes you feel great. It's a hormone that really includes a sense of, divines a sense of positivity and elation. And it suppresses the release of the stress hormone cortisol. So when you are feeling stressed, your body is releasing that. And so you have this ability to turn it around just by moving. For me, yoga has always been a great tool like that. So those are some short-term tools. Longer term, there are guiding principles, I think, that we can use in our lives to help us achieve equanimity throughout, not just in the moment, but longer term. There's a quote from an author, I think her name is Ann Dillard. She goes, as we live our days, so we live our lives. So if you can find that equanimity day in and day out, that is how you will live your life. And it might help to have these long-term pillars of what a meaningful life is. So there's a psychologist named Emily Estefani Smith, and she says there really are 4 pillars to a meaningful life, which I think are really a foundation for equanimity. And one of them is belonging, meaning being in relationships where you're valued for who you are, and this includes bonds for family and friends, and where you value others. Another one is purpose. I think we can all understand that. Finding ways to be altruistic or serve others, or at least feel that you're contributing in some way. And it could be through work. I know when I was a project manager, when I would lead my team and we would have a successful project, I definitely felt like I had a purpose. Certainly my teaching is helping me feel like I have a purpose. So yeah, what can we do with our days that gives us that sense of meaning in our lives? And then she says the third thing is transcendence, which she defines and we know is really mindfulness, that idea of being in the now, in the present moment. It could also be in the flow, like when you're painting or playing music or dancing, but just that sense of, there's nothing else to think about right now, just being here in this present moment. It brings a sense of ease and calm. And the last, I think she agrees with me, is storytelling, or that ego identification. So think about the narrative you create for yourself, and she says, we are the authors of our story. So how do you create meaning from your experience? That's up to you. So those are the 4 pillars. So there are some short-term tools for achieving equanimity. Here are some longer-term tools, and just a little wisdom around the potential for us to really embolden ourselves, allow ourselves to have this sense of equanimity. It's actually within us. It's our natural state. And, we know things are not always pleasant. It just doesn't mean we have to give up pretending things aren't happening. Shinzen Young, one of the teachers I quote often, says, live the light because it shows you the way, but love the dark because it shows you the stars. So with awareness, we can cultivate that sense of well-being, even acknowledging suffering, and allow you to make choices that then alleviate that suffering. And again, the tools are part of the work. They're part of the hard work, that day by day awareness, acceptance, and acknowledgement. And they can provide that distance from that anxious or unpleasant state, so you can begin to focus on the steps to change, creating those stories that are meaningful and empowering, as opposed to robbing you of your own potential. So I hope that explains a little bit of what equanimity is. And I'm sure you guys have experienced it at one time or another. You might just not have realized that you have the power to cultivate that and bring it into your existence. The more that you understand it, I think the easier it can be. So thank you for that. And then maybe we'll go into a sit right now. Thank you.